Consoled, Dr. Yang is a scientist experimenting with immortality. Despite all his failures, his driving force is saving his daughter, So Yian, from her inevitable end. When his facility is raided one day, he is stopped from injecting a serum into his daughter since it has already taken the lives of 100 others before. However, he merely retorts that he has successfully tested it on himself. As soon as he injects So Yian, he is shot as a precaution just before a massive earthquake rocks the city. In its aftermath, Seoul transforms into a wasteland of debris over the next 3 years. Walking around the mess one day, Ji-won comes across an alligator. Confidently launching a flaming arrow at it does not work in his favor, as he is forced to seek shelter in an abandoned car while it chases after him. When a terrified Ji-won calls out for help, Nam-san comes to his aid. Pulling the alligator away, he eventually slays it, thereby saving Ji-wan's life. Meanwhile, Suna's grandmother asks if they should shift to the bus district where a large number of survivors live together. Against the idea, Suna suggests staying where they are, but is soon reminded of having to visit Nam-san, who is offering meat to the residents in a barter. Getting there later, Suna's grandmother thanks Nam-san for saving her granddaughter's life 3 years ago. In return for some meat, Suna offers Nam-san a sketch she made of him during a hunt. Just as they leave, a bunch of gangsters get there. Under the pretense of looking for a criminal, they pick a few random people from the crowd before the leader notices Suna. Sensing trouble, Ji-won steps in and picks a fight with the gang, closely followed by Nam-san. Nabbing the instigator, he eventually learns that the gang's leader is actually a guy named Tiger. Curious about the fresh water in their possession, Nam-san is then told about the apartment where they have plenty of clean drinking water. Once the gang departs, Nam-san and Ji-won gather their bartered goods to head home. On the way, they come across Suna and her grandmother speaking to a group of people headed by the teacher, who introduces herself as the leader of the apartment's volunteer group. Intending to help families with teenage children, she extends an invitation for Suna and her grandmother to join them. Making up her mind about heading over to the apartment with the teacher, Suna is assured of visits from both Ji-won and Nam-san. Before leaving, she gives Ji-won a sketch she made of him, which he gladly accepts. Later that evening, Ji-won joins Nam-san on a night hunt while Suna and her grandmother meet up with another group headed to the apartment. Befriending Ju-yi from the group, both girls are happy to have met someone of the same age after a long time. Soon enough, when the terrain becomes difficult for the seniors of the group to tackle, the teacher suggests letting a couple of volunteers accompany Suna's grandmother and another elderly man to a medical station at the halfway point where they can rest before continuing the journey the next day. Entrusting the elders to the volunteers, the group then proceeds further to where Sergeant Kwon awaits with a few vehicles to take them ahead. Wondering why her grandmother couldn't have joined them if alternate transportation was this close, Suna is forced to keep going with the group without waiting for the elders to join them. Suna's doubt is further strengthened, however, when she notices a wound under Sergeant Kwon's ear. Elsewhere, the elders are taken to a ridge with absolutely no medical facility in sight. Soon the man is unceremoniously shoved down the ridge to his end. Just as Suna's grandmother is stabbed, a wandering Ji-won comes across the group. Immediately getting into action, the volunteers shoot at him. One of them is hit with a machete in return as Nam-san uses one of Ji-wan's arrows to stab the other. While Ji-won checks on Suna's grandmother, the volunteers are miraculously revived and begin attacking afresh. When Ji-won manages to trap one of them, he is shocked to see that he cuts off his own foot to free himself before attacking Ji-won again. Fortunately, a stranger's timely arrival saves him as she successfully takes a volunteer down. She repeats the deed when she attacks Nam-san's opponent as well before he kills him. The next morning, Ji-won and Nam-san respectfully bury Suna's grandmother. While Suna reaches the apartment with the rest of the group, Nam-san speaks to the stranger who helped them and learns that only chopping the heads off the volunteers prevents them from being revived. Introducing herself as Eun-ho, she asks for Nam-san's help in saving her subordinates at the apartment. As a sergeant leading a special unit of the Air Force, she says they had come across an apartment building that had remained standing after the earthquake. All the survivors they had come across were gathered there, and eventually, the only surviving doctor, Dr. Yang, had joined them as well. However, following multiple complaints from parents about their children going missing after meeting Dr. Yang, Eun-ho had been introduced to the doctor's miraculous breakthrough when Sergeant Kwon shot a subordinate in her presence. Instead of meeting his end, a subordinate had then got back on his feet, seemingly unharmed. Addressing himself as the future of humanity, Dr. Yang had then tried to get Eun-ho onto his side, but she had fought everyone and managed to escape. Hearing her story, Nam-san decides to immediately head over to the apartment to save Suna's life. At the apartment, meanwhile, Dr. Yang instructs the distribution of clean water, which he mentions has been purified there. While everyone drinks from their bottles, a thoughtful Suna requests another one for her grandmother. Entering the house assigned to them, she marvels at the running water. Explaining further, Eun-ho states that the apartment has been continuously taking in teenagers like Suna. Putting together a rough plan, she says that while she could tackle the security at the entrance, Nam-san and Ji-won could discreetly liberate her associates from the underground prison. Spotting the volunteer's bottle of water just then, Nam-san is reminded of the gang that was at Bus District the earlier day and decides to head over to meet Tiger. As it turns out, Tiger had been forced to leave boxing because of Nam-san and has been waiting for revenge ever since. Recruiting the help of a rival gang led by Peng Ji-ai, Tiger gets everyone to attack the newcomers. While Nam-san tackles most of the thugs, Eun-ho and Ji-won defend themselves well. Peng Ji-ai soon realizes Nam-san's might even as Ji-won grabs the opportunity to free the people captured by the gangs. Finally facing Nam-san, Tiger is easily tackled while Peng Ji-ai flees with his men. At the apartment meanwhile, Suna approaches Sergeant Kwon to ask about her grandmother. Overhearing her, the teacher assures her that she will be there soon. Dr. Young then announces the grades of the children, which he has made into a competition to get the best apartment unit and free meals. Later, when the teacher mentions separating the children from their parents, Ju-yi's parents ensure that they will be allowed to meet their daughter before bidding her farewell. While Ju-yi and Suna join the teacher, the parents are led downstairs to the water filtration facility to join the other parents. Back at the gang's hideout, Nam-san questions Tiger about the water in his possession, unwilling to be knocked out by his adversary. Tiger mentions that in exchange for the monopolized clean water, the gangs provide the apartment with teenagers that they find during their travel across the wastelands. After the teacher introduces Suna and Ju-yi to their new class, Suna observes that every student in the class has a wound under their ear. When the teacher repeatedly mentions Dr. Yang's treatment for metabolic enhancement and how he should be supported, Suna questions why Dr. Yang won't just share the water with everyone. She is then told that he lost his daughter because of tyrants like the ones who live outside the apartment. While Suna continues to be skeptical, Ju-yi, on the other hand, seems more than willing to agree with Dr. Yang's way of living. At mealtime later, Suna wonders if they shouldn't have the water, but she sees that Ju-yi has already done so. Dr. Yang gets to the class then and states that he is working on finding a way that will allow humans to survive on small amounts of food and water. Till that happens, he says that everyone should ensure eating everything that they have been provided with. After he sets up a consultation with Ju-yi for a while later, Suna asks him if her grandmother has safely arrived. The teacher informs her that since her grandmother is severely ill, she cannot meet her for a couple of days while she gets treated. Assuring Suna about personally caring for her grandmother, Dr. Yang offers her water and asks her to eat well. However, her doubts force Suna not to have the water. Getting his injection later, Sergeant Kwon expresses his worry about the volunteers who haven't returned yet. He also questions Dr. Yang about how long they will have to subsist on regular injections. Dismissing him, Dr. Yang simply replies that he is working on it. When all the students sleep later that night, Suna escapes from the dormitory. At the water filtration facility meanwhile, Ju-yi's parents are told that they cannot meet their daughter. The commotion this causes forces Dr. Yang to be summoned, carefully managing to hide while he passes her by. Suna then proceeds further towards Dr. Yang's office. While Dr. Yang invites Ju-yi's parents to his lab to meet her, Suna gets to his office and sees the experiments he has been working on. Shocked that several people have lost their lives in the course of his research, she then comes across an unconscious Ju-yi in his lab. Hiding when she hears voices outside the door, Suna witnesses Ju-yi's parents walk into the lab with Dr. Yang and Sergeant Kwon. While the parents are shocked and worried about Ju-yi, Dr. Yang then reveals that his work has made it possible for him to save his daughter. Seeing the state in which the doctor has somehow preserved So-yin with a beating heart, Ju-yi's father interferes with her procedure, which causes her to have seizures before she eventually loses her life. An enraged Dr. Yang then ruthlessly attacks Ju-yi's father, and her mother is shot while she tries to escape. Having seen everything, Suna remains hidden until Dr. Yang gleefully discovers her there. On their way to the apartment, Nam-san and Eun-ho take a break for the night while Ji-won gets some rest. While he wakes up so they can go ahead in the morning, Suna is now a test subject in Dr. Yang's lab. Working on her, he lets her know that the pituitary glands in teenagers need to be tweaked to be used in favor of his research, which is aided by the water they purify. It is learning about her grandmother's fate, however, that disturbs Suna the most. At the apartment's entrance, meanwhile, Nam-san forcefully breaks through the gates and crashes inside. Along with Ji-won and Eun-ho, then Nam-san opens fire against the several mutant soldiers that they come across before Eun-ho leads them downstairs to the prison. Finding most of the cells empty, Eun-ho finally locates her associates in the final cell. However, she is shocked to see that they have mutated into reptilian beings who immediately begin to attack. Nam-san and Ji-won band together to defend themselves initially, until Eun-ho joins them in putting an end to the threat they face. While it breaks her heart to do so, she understands the importance of getting rid of her team. Just as she apologizes to Nam-san for an unsuccessful plan, they hear Dr. Yang's announcement urging the residents of the apartment to stay in their houses. Determined as ever, Nam-san and Ji-won are accompanied by Eun-ho as they plan to rescue Suna. Blowing up the soldiers that Sergeant Kwon sent their way, the group switches weapons with them before Nam-san asks Ji-won and Eun-ho to find Suna while he tackles the incoming soldiers. Confidently slashing through the mutants with his machete, Nam-san makes his way through them and grabs another weapon to take the remaining out before getting to the filtration facility. Eun-ho, meanwhile, gets Ji-won to keep going upstairs while she stays behind and skillfully takes down the soldiers who would have followed him. As she makes her way ahead, though, she faces Sergeant Kwon while Nam-san suggests the parents in the filtration facility to find their children before it is too late. In a battle of wits with Sergeant Kwon, Eun-ho stabs his eye and strongly tackles his attacks until he eventually stabs her and flings her away. Ji-won, meanwhile, reaches the classroom and is stunned to see that none of the students make an effort to leave even after he asks them to escape. He then threatens the teacher to lead him to Suna. On their way to the lab, they come across Sergeant Kwon just as Nam-san gets there as well. Choosing to face the sergeant, Nam-san gets Ji-won to find Suna. In the lab, Dr. Young injects himself with the serum created from Suna's procedure and exclaims his success to his daughter. Once Suna regains consciousness, she asks Dr. Young if he thinks that So-yeon would truly be proud of the kind of person her father has become. Facing trouble with the serum he injected into himself, he is shocked to learn that Suna had not been drinking the apartment's water, which meant that he injected himself with contaminated serum. Ji-won gets there just then and faces the attack of a soldier. Dr. Young hurriedly instructs the teacher to transfer So-yeon into a suitcase while Nam-san tackles Sergeant Kwon. Despite his injured state, Nam-san defends himself well before finally beheading the sergeant. Downstairs, parents are reunited with their children even as Dr. Young attempts to flee with So-yeon. Concerned only about his daughter's safety, he throws an active grenade in his lab to get rid of all his work along with the teacher. While Eun-ho gains consciousness, Nam-san finds Ji-won and Suna amidst the destroyed lab. On his way out, Dr. Young is stopped by multiple angry parents who begin attacking him. They are forced to stop, however, when he suddenly mutates. Taking advantage of everyone's fear, he blindly opens fire and ends numerous lives before realizing that his spree damaged So-yeon's suitcase. Losing her for real this time, Dr. Young grieves his loss as he continues to mutate due to the contaminated serum. Nam-san eventually gets rid of him before he can cause any more trouble. Deciding to start afresh, Eun-ho announces her plans to stay at the apartment to help the survivors. On the other hand, choosing to head home, Suna grieves the loss of her grandmother before eventually joining Nam-san and Ji-won at the bus district.